Hey everybody, how's it going? Stoud Man coming back at you again, and as you can probably tell from my voice, still sick, still coughing up a lung. So yeah, sorry about that, and I'm sorry that my videos. I'm going through and editing them right now, and realizing that I'm not having as easy of a time getting to the point and making a solid point in these videos. So I do apologize if you've been noticing that I've been lacking in the contextual critical analysis as of late, but it'll happen when your head's full of phlegm, essentially. What are you gonna do? Anyways, today we're gonna be talking about a movie series that I really enjoy and that I think a lot of people really enjoy. And a lot of people are familiar with this movie series. You can see it up there. Well, you can at least see the suggestion of what I'm about to talk about. And that is, of course, the Night of the Living Dead, or the Of the Living Dead series, as it were. In particular, the Of the Living Dead series as told by George Romero. I wanted to go back and check out these movies since I finally have so many of them in my collection. I at least have the main three in my collection, and as I showed you, I also picked up the remake recently on Blu-ray, so yeah, that's nice. Anyways, since I had all three, I figured what better time than now, and I really felt like going back and watching these movies again because it's been a while since I actually sat down and watched them. So yeah, started off with Night of the Living Dead. I picked this up at an FYE in SeaTac, or in that area at least, where I was hanging out with some friends and we just went to see Mad Max Fury Road, and we hopped on into FYE to do some hunting as well there, and one of my friends found this sitting on the shelf, and another friend, Skinslip, said, "Oh man, you need to get this. You absolutely need to get this. This is the version of the movie to get on DVD." And he's not wrong. This is a really nice addition. Just look at the features list here on the back. There are a lot of features here. A lot of great ones at that. This is absolutely a fantastic release. It even includes liner notes from Stephen King. This whole thing here is written by Stephen King. So yeah, that's pretty darn cool. And I had a blast watching it on this particular release. I decided to watch this particular version of the movie, this DVD version of the movie, because it includes a commentary track with director George A. Romero and the entire cast. Okay, it's not the entire cast, I don't think, but there are a lot of people from the cast in this commentary, and it was quite an enlightening commentary, actually. It was a very good commentary, I have to say. So yeah, if you ever get the chance to listen to this commentary on this Night of the Living Dead DVD here from, it's the Millennium Edition from Elite Entertainment. You'll know it because it's got a red box, and it's got the red lining here. Red lining, it's all shiny and stuff, and even the side is all shiny. What I noted while watching this is that Romero several times in the commentary says he did not intend for there to be any commentary in terms of like the way that it's shot, in terms of the way that the story is told and everything. He did not necessarily intend for this to be a commentary on anything. In particular, he did not intend for it to be a commentary on racism or anything like that, which a lot of people have taken it to be. And I just want to take a moment to, remind everybody that little thing called authorial intent, which the very concept of authorial intent is flawed in a lot of important ways. Because the problem with authorial intent is that you can't necessarily say that just because the author or the creator or one of the head creators of the film, just because they didn't intend for this to be in the story, that it's not in there, that subtext is not in there, and you're just reading too far into it. No, the rule is, in terms of criticism, the golden rule If you couldn't find evidence from within the text, then there is a point to what you found there. You have a point to make. Your point has some validity. It doesn't mean that your point is correct. It doesn't mean that what you found is definitely what is actually being said or what the author intended, or it doesn't mean it's actually there. It just means that it could be there. That thing that you're seeing that you think means something, the meaning you're ascribing to it could actually be there, but there's nothing to say that it is for sure, and there's nothing to say that it isn't. And the thing is, the reason that whole flaw, that loophole in authorial intent exists, is because with the way that psychology works, you never know if George A. Romero maybe didn't intend for that to be in there, but subconsciously he just put it in there anyways because that's what subconsciously he wanted to talk about. Maybe like he himself didn't intend it, but subconsciously, without even realizing, he put it in there intentionally. You know what I mean? That's why it's impossible to say that authorial intent is the one and only thing that you should listen to. It's the most important thing in determining what a film means or what a text means. And that's why authorial intent works so well with film too, because there's more than one author. Filmmaking requires a lot of different people working on it all at the same time, and it's impossible to say that maybe some of them didn't intend for that to be in there. So as much as you might want to believe, well, that's not in there. The whole racial thing, the commentary that they're saying is there with the racism and all that. Nah, that's not in there. It could be. You can't say it's not in there because there is evidence in the text. There's evidence in the film that suggests that that may have been something going on there. And I'll bring that point up later, but for now I just want to go on talking about the actual movie itself. I think that this is a extremely influential movie. It was extremely influential to horror films that came after it because it didn't have a happy ending. And granted, not every horror movie has a happy ending, but if you remember back to the B movies and back with the Universal classic monsters and the horror movies that came out during the 30s, 40s, 50s, and whatnot, if you remember those movies, then you're probably familiar with a lot of them, even though they're scary and they have a happy ending. The problem gets resolved. There's a resolution of some sort in all of these movies. Even in the Harryhausen movies I was talking about, there is a resolution to those. So the mere fact that there is a resolution in some way that is like, a happy kind of we got the monster kind of thing, this is different from that. This is absolutely more into the era of what New Hollywood almost. And it's not really New Hollywood because it's not being made in the Hollywood system, I don't believe. But it's that same kind of film that's bucking the trend that Hollywood is putting out there. The whole reason that Hollywood films in the 50s and the early 60s weren't selling as well and why audiences were not going to those films anymore was because they were getting tired of the same old cliches. They were getting tired of the same kind of resolution that we would always see in those movies. You know what I mean? It just got dull seeing the same ABC, 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 repetitive over and over and over again. You know what I mean? People wanted a shift of some kind. They wanted something to really shake them. They wanted something in these movies to be groundbreaking, earth-shattering in some way, and a lot of them were not. They were just the same old thing that you'd already seen a million times before because the Hollywood type of film had been perfected, or at least they thought it had been perfected at that point. But the audiences proved that there is no perfecting the art because at some point the perfection of the art gets dull and boring. You don't want to see it anymore because you know what's going to happen in the end. you're so familiar with it that you get freaking tired of it. And quite frankly, that's one of the things we're seeing in modern day films in general today. Like, just look at what happened with movies this year. Like, how many movies came out this year, 2016, that most audiences have loathed and hated? That if it had come out maybe, think about if it had come out maybe 10, 15 years ago, would they have hated it this much? A lot of the movies that people loathed and hated this year, I can honestly say they wouldn't have been so despised 10, 15 years ago. But because audiences are getting really sick and tired of seeing the same old thing happening over and over and over again, the Hollywood idea of the perfect film, they're they're tired of it. They want to see the trend bucked. And so there's a potential for a new Hollywood happening once again sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. Who knows if that'll actually happen? The point I'm trying to make is that this particular movie came out about around that time period where they were starting to buck that trend, where filmmakers were starting to do interesting things with film that people really hadn't seen before, or at least it wasn't necessarily a popular thing to see. It wasn't something that you saw all the time in film. So yeah, Night of the Living Dead was very groundbreaking in that way, and when I look at this, I kind of see like the beginnings of the kind of thing that you see in things like The Walking Dead today. The Walking Dead is very much inspired by Night of the Living Dead, I think. Just the way that the characters act, the way they react, the way they behave, it very much feels like you're watching The Walking Dead. It very much feels like something you would see in The Walking Dead. You know, all hope is lost, or even some of them kind of go crazy or something like that. The freaking impetus behind that, the creator of that kind of horror film, of that kind of zombie story, is right freaking here. So yeah, I really like this movie. I appreciate everything that it has done for the horror franchise, or for the horror genre. Sorry, again, my head is all loopy. I'm amazed I've been able to keep it together as long as I have. I've rambled quite a bit, but bear with me. Next up, I watched, of course, Dawn of the Dead. I really want to get the Ultimate Collector's Edition, but I'm also kind of holding out and hoping that there's a Blu-ray edition of this coming out at some point. I know they released the theatrical version of this, but I want to see like a Scream Factory kind of release of Dawn of the Dead. And I keep thinking, maybe if I hold out a year or two, come on. Because I know the second that I bite the bullet and get the Ultimate Collection, that's when Shout Factory or somebody else is going to come along and say, we're releasing an even better version on Blu-ray. And I'm going to be like, are you freaking kidding me? But yeah, I picked this up actually at the same time that I picked this up, while I was at the horror convention that I went to last year with my good friend Brandon Skinslip here on YouTube. And this one was the one that I got at Half Price Books, and it was like $5 or something like that, and I needed it because I didn't have it in my collection. And I was like, well, I kind of want to get the Blu-ray even though it's a theatrical edition. But I was just, whatever, I'll get this version. It's the special Divamax edition, which purportedly is high definition. Yeah, right. It's not a bad transfer, mind you. It's a pretty good release. I did enjoy it quite a bit. But yeah, I would really, really like to see a Blu-ray release that had the Ultimate Edition, that had all the different cuts and stuff like that. And when I think of that, I think the only company that can really do justice to that is Shout Factory with their Scream Factory line. So I really hope they do that at some point, but who knows? It's up in the air, and quite frankly, it's not likely. It's just that I really want it to happen. Anyways, Dawn of the Dead was also influential to horror films and zombie films. I don't know if it was as influential as Night of the Living Dead, but I think it's definitely more fondly remembered than Night of the Living Dead for whatever reason. And quite frankly, like, the commentary in this one is fairly different. I mean, they do have a bit of like racial kind of commentary in there, even if it's not intended. They do have that in there, but it's not like the focus. The focus of the movie, if there's any commentary to it, is just, the vapidity of people in this country and what would actually happen. It's kind of like almost a Mad Max approach to the zombie story, because you even see a group of people that kind of behave like they're in Mad Max world, who come in and fucking raid the mall that they're in. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it's definitely a more violent and a more, hope is lost kind of approach to it than even Night of the Living Dead was. And they felt, I feel like, emboldened by the success of Night of the Living Dead to really do whatever the hell they wanted to with this and really go all the way. And it paid dividends. This is a fantastic movie. I absolutely love it. It's probably one of my favorite horror movies. And I was appreciating all the commentary about pop culture, about our culture. I particularly like the scene where he keeps like turning on the TV even though she says there's no point in that, and he just keeps doing it anyways, like a zombie. I mean, he's definitely trying to say something with that, even if he says he isn't, which I don't know if he did or didn't say that. But yeah, really good movie. And if you haven't already seen the original Dawn of the Dead, you absolutely need to, obviously. And quite frankly, at this point, if you want to get it and you don't already have it, don't get the Blu-ray. I kind of wanted to get the theatrical Blu-ray just for reasons, just so I could have it in high definition. But I recommend getting the Ultimate Collector's Edition. You can find it on eBay for like $20-30, usually more in the $30 arena. But it's worth it because it comes with a whole lot of cool stuff. So yeah, it's the version of it to get. But if you can't afford that, then any copy of this that you run across that's like $5, then of course, get it and put it in your collection. It belongs there. Next up, I watched Day of the Dead on Blu-ray, and like I said, Shout Factory, man. If they've got Day of the Dead, why don't they get Dawn of the Dead? I could see them doing a triple bill at some point. Like, imagine them having the rights to do Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and Night of the Living Dead, and having all three of these in like an ultimate spectacular box set. That would be amazing. Don't even lie. You want that to happen. This one comes with a boatload of extra special features, including an hour and a half, like a feature-length documentary, which I highly recommend watching. It's really cool. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing, but from what I saw, it's a proper documentary, and you learn a lot of stuff about the movie. And I really got to get around to watching the whole thing, but I didn't get a chance because I'm doing all these reviews and I gotta watch a lot more movies to do all these reviews. So Day of the Dead might not be like my favorite of the three. I mean, I feel like it definitely went a little bit downhill, but not necessarily too far, because it's just kind of trying to tell a different story. It's kind of like the fears and concerns of the day have changed, and they're more focused on a different kind of fear and concern about like militarization. It's kind of like a post-Vietnam movie versus what Night of the Living Dead may have been. Yeah, I mean, the whole military kind of aspect to this, as I was watching it, I kept thinking, man, I remember seeing a lot of these shots and a lot of these scenes in the third Resident Evil movie. Do you guys remember those? I do. That movie ripped off Day of the Dead so freaking much, it's not even funny. Now, I kind of already knew that, but, as you're watching it, it's hard to not to see it. It's like, oh my god, now I kind of want to watch the third Resident Evil movie again. And that's why I like the third Resident Evil movie, probably the best out of all of them, because it just pays homage to so many different things. It's awesome. But another reason that I like this movie is Bubs. Bubs is awesome. I just like the inclusion of Bubs in there, because slowly throughout the movies, at the beginning in Night of the Living Dead, you get the hint that they actually can become intelligent and sentient in a lot of ways, possibly. Just the barest, slightest hint. And then, in Dawn of the Dead, they almost get to the point of confirming that. Like, yes, these things actually can learn, and it's getting kind of creepy kind of thing. But in this one, they just kind of go all out, and you've got Bubs who literally just kind of learns how to behave, and it's almost as if he has these memories of when he was a human, when he was alive, and he actually also seems to have some sense of morality to him as well. It's kind of weird, it's kind of creepy, it's kind of cool, but one of the things I really like about it is that he, as a dead person, as a zombie, actually has more humanity in him than the humans that are trying to survive. And when I saw that, I'm just like, that is a lot like what you see in The Walking Dead nowadays. So, I mean, yeah, I have to say, The Walking Dead was highly inspired by George A. Romero. I don't think there's any denying it. As for the movie itself, great movie, great freaking movie. There's a reason I have it in my collection now. One being that it was on sale, and two being that it's a really good movie. I had waited for a long time to actually see this, and then when I did, I was just kind of like, wow, that was actually really good. And seeing it for the second time here, actually, yeah, I'm glad I have it in my collection because I can see myself watching this quite a bit more in the future. Like I said, if you don't have this already, the feature-length documentary alone is a reason to pick it up. It also, of course, includes like audio commentary and a bunch of other special features. I mean, just look at all those special features. Scream Factory knows how to treat horror buffs. Or should I say horror hounds? I don't know, whatever. Next up, on to the next one, we have Dawn of the Dead, the remake. Now, yes, I understand there was also a Night of the Living Dead remake that came out in 1990. I don't have it, and I didn't feel like going to the lengths that it would take to get it. So I just said, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to go straight to Dawn of the Dead here and call it a day. Night of the Living Dead, I feel like, is more of a proper, like, almost recreation in some ways of the original movie than most horror movies, even of that era, most horror remakes, I should say, were. And then when you get to this one, it's just complete deviation. Complete deviation from the original series. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's worth pointing out that, you know, unlike in George A. Romero's work, the zombies in this one don't just kind of and sometimes they can move a little bit faster, but they don't necessarily move very fast. These zombies will fucking run at you, bro. They will fucking kill you. Don't fuck around with them. They will kill you. And yeah, I mean, this one is definitely more of a postmodern movie. They've got a lot of references. The way that they do the references, I guess, is what gets me, because that's how you differentiate the kind of remake that it is and the era that the remake was made in as well. I mean, when you look at something like The Thing, or you look at something like The Fly even, or, you know, just these remakes that happened in like the 80s and the 70s and stuff like that. When you look at those remakes, a lot of them, they at least contained a lot of the story elements. Most of the time, not with The Fly, but most of the time they contained a lot of the story elements that came from the original movie. At least retained like just the basic, most important elements, right? And that was kind of their way of paying homage to it by retelling the story in a different day in a modern era kind of thing, right? This, it tells their story in a different way in a modern era, but they pay homage not by retelling the exact same story or even by adding a whole lot of elements that were from the same story, but instead kind of making an amalgamation, I feel like, of all three of these movies right here that I have upside down. But yeah, there we go. These movies. An amalgamation of sorts where at the end of it they almost basically do the same thing that they were doing at the end of Day of the Dead. So, it's inspired slightly by Romero's work, right? But it's not entirely inspired by it. It's also inspired by a lot of other horror tropes that we've seen happen since George A. Romero came into the scene. Stuff that came from the 80s, stuff that came from the 90s. You see it all in this movie. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this is just kind of a movie that just ramps things up in a lot of ways. And their references are more of things like, oh, look, we brought this actor back who was in Dawn of the Dead. And we brought this actor back as well. And it's just like, these references are nice. And they kind of have a reference like that in Dawn of the Dead where they have like Peck and Paw's shop or whatever. But in the original Dawn of the Dead. But in this one, it's like that's all you get. And that's the only thing that really feels like the original Romero movies in a lot of ways. And honestly, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I really do like this movie. As much as I'm shitting on it right now, I do like this movie. It's fun. It's just good, cheesy fun, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just not a Romero of the Dead movie. You know what I mean? But it's still cool. I really like it. And the creature effects are really freaking awesome. And I think the creature effects are probably kind of what inspired a lot of the creature effects that you see in The Walking Dead as well. Honestly, The Walking Dead is inspired by the creature effects of like Rick Baker and stuff like that from the 80s and 90s. It's inspired by those really cool horror movies from back then. But this is kind of one of the first times that we saw them try to even make it even better and just beautiful. Something that looks good in high def as well. You know what I mean? So in that way, I feel like this kind of sort of also inspired The Walking Dead. But either way, this is a good one to watch every now and then. I wouldn't say it's the best of the movies of the Day of the Dead or Dawn of the Dead or Night of the Living Dead. Of these 4 movies that I watched, this is probably the worst, but it's still like a 5 or 6 out of 10. And then you gotta say this is like a 7 out of 10. 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. Somewhere around there. They're classics and they're good and they're important to horror history. And they're some of the first movies that introduced this concept of not every ending has to be happy. Not every ending has to have a hero that saves the day or that, saves everybody. In the end of this, almost everybody dies. And Bubs is like the one who survives, you know what I mean? There are always like a few survivors, except for in the original Night of the Living Dead. There are always a few survivors in these movies. But their story isn't necessarily happy. And that is what I like about the Of the Dead movies. So, yeah. I haven't actually seen Diary of the Dead or, what is it, Survival of the Dead or something. I haven't seen those ones yet, but I've heard good and bad things about them. So, I'll get around to it at some point. Maybe next year for Halloween, I'll do a review of those. How about that? Anyways, that'll do it for me today. Thanks for watching, you guys. Catch you later. Peace.